Oh, Shopsy. Smooth 98.1 Lagos, Nigeria world. Welcome to the part of Smooth Breakfast where we get to bring you the news analysis on all those stories that are affecting you, maybe affecting your peace of mind as well, who knows. But we're here to bring you the balanced coverage of it on Smooth Breakfast. I'm Shokwa Martins, and joining me for the next half hour, I've got Mr. C in the studio. Good morning.
Good morning, Shakwa. Good morning, Lagos.
All right, great to have you on. And I would love for you to get your words in as well. So do make sure to join the conversation. We are streaming live up on youtube.com/, smooth 981 FM Lagos. You can go over there, join the conversation on the live chat. Let us know what you have to say and send WhatsApp messages to 0809 4440981 already up on WhatsApp, checking out the messages. You can also use the hashtag freshlypressed981 on Twitter. All right, so let's get started. I think we'll start off with our leading story for today coming in from the Daily Trust. CBN redesigns three Naira notes. Now, according to the Central Bank of Nigeria, Governor Godwin Emefiele, that is the 200 Naira note, the 500 Naira note, and the 1000 Naira notes. He held a press conference in which he gave the rationale behind this change of currency design. And a part of that was he disclosed that over 80% of the total cash in circulation was outside of the banking system. So they're trying to get the cash inside and, able to be tracked and traced and, yeah, kept secure. He also said 2.7, and I'm going to quote him now, 2.7 trillion naira out of 3.23 trillion naira exists outside the commercial bank. He also went on to say that the decision would impact the value of the naira. Mr. C, let's unpack this news for all the listeners and viewers as well.
Okay, thank you, Shakwa. So, it's the CBN governor's statements yesterday were quite interesting. Now, he did reveal that 80% of the total money in circulation is outside the banking system. Now, the first question that comes to my mind is, why is this so? Isn't that an unusually large
Mm,
percentage? Because you would think that anyone who that it doesn't really make a lot of sense to hold naira at this point in time, given the continuing fall in the real value of the naira. And you would want to imagine that anyone who has access to large amounts of naira would want to convert, say, into foreign exchange, either the pound sterling, the US dollar, or even the euro. So I'm struggling to understand why anyone would need to keep large sums of naira. But then again, hold up. When election season, expenses have come. You need to pay for campaign posters, you need to pay for campaign t shirts, you need to pay for rallies, you need to pay for mobilization, you need to oil the wheel of the political machinery.
mm.
And to do that, you will need a lot more naira than currently. So it might make sense. It might be an explanation as to why there's so much money outside the banking system. Now, in addition, he did point out that the last time the naira was designed was over 20 years ago,
And global best practices has it between 6 and 8 years.
six
Yes.
and 8 years. So here's another question. He's been in office, say, the past 6, 7 years. Did he not know this before now?
Another question that I'd like to ask, and really, it just goes further along from what you just pointed out, is the timeline of it all. So the new note should be, according to the governor, be coming into effect by December 15th, with old notes to be phased out by January 31st, I think it is. Yeah, just in time for the
So
elections.
guess what? For the new notes to be ready to be injected into our circulation, everything that needs to have been done has been done. Because you have to design the notes, you have to incorporate the security features. And flowing from what he said that they've obtained permission from the president in line with Section 19 of the CBN Act. Now, further question, what exactly is the hurry right now? This 2.32 trillion that is outside the banking system didn't just get there now.
Mm.
It's been over a period of time. You're leaving office. Okay, this administration is leaving office in May. The CBN governor statutorily is protected. His employment is protected unless, of course, he resigns or he's found bankrupt. His address will be bankrupt by court, or two-thirds of the Senate decides that he should be removed. Now, what exactly is the rush? Why not leave this decision to the incoming administration? Now, to introduce new notes, that is going to involve extra cost. Where is this money coming from? Because to print new notes, to design new notes and have them printed, it will cost you money. Now, in the face of declining oil revenue, declining crude oil production, it will be interesting to note how this whole exercise is being funded. Now, if the money outside circulation, what is the plan for getting it back into circulate into the system? Beyond saying that after January there will no longer be legal tender.
Now, back to the timeline and also looking at the natural disaster that we has affected so many people's lives and just their daily activities. Do you think that we will be able to see, and especially if we don't have, we see that in some local government areas there aren't any banks. Will we be able to see people meet up with this? And I have to put it into the context of a historical context where we've seen these policies and these information handed down or uh, decrees handed down from on high saying, okay, we need to do this and this is the date. But then we always see a postponement because it's always comes out a little bit too rushed. Do you think that we might see some sort of postponement?
So it will not be surprising to find out that come next year that it will be extended. Now we must remember the deadline given next year is about 2 weeks before the presidential election.
Mm-hmm.
Realistically, is that a feasible date? Now, one point I haven't touched on and which is important, for 80% of your money to be outside of your money supply to be outside the banking system, it calls into question the existing anti-money laundering prescriptions you have in place. Because that volume of money should not be able to go out and stay out. The whole idea of a banking system and the anti-money laundering measures put in place is that money should circulate within the economy, and at any point in time, you should be able to see where the money is.
Hmm.
Now, I'm not saying 100% of the money supply should be within the banking system, but to have 80% outside, this is something the EFCC should look into because it's something that falls within their core mandate. Anything that threatens the economics, financial system of the country. How do you have 80% of your money supply outside? Where exactly outside is it? Because we must be honest with ourselves. The Naira is pretty useless outside Nigeria.
Well, we've already seen an EFCC response to this with the EFCC saying that this was a. I'm even trying to find. They said that it was a paraphrasing good and timely move.
Which one? The CBN move.
Yes.
So the CBN move is a good and timely move, not a problem. Where were they when it got to this point?
And from the EFCC boss, what do we say that the CBN hold on that the CBN's move was in tandem with the objectives of the Money Laundering Prevention Prohibition Act, which criminalizes the conduct of cash transactions. So talking about the same thing, but from a different perspective.
So good. They're talking about it because now it's not being designed to fix a problem. Now, but however, how did the problem grow so big? Because somewhere, somehow, some people dropped the ball. This is pointing to a failure or a near failure of regulatory oversight.
Do you think anything is going to happen? Because you're the one asking these questions at this point. Have we seen anyone else asking these questions?
So, from the body language of the CBN and the EFCC, it appears that they've decided to ignore how we got here and have just decided to move on with what they believe is the
The
fix.
tabula rasa approach.
Now, if
Okay.
you change the currency, but you do not change the reasons or the methods or the process through which that large amount of money escaped from the banking system, guess what? You'll introduce the new notes and you're back to square one. The bigger question is why is this volume of money leaving the banking system?
Hmm.
Until we identify why it is leaving, who is coordinating this vast withdrawal of money, we'll continue running round in circles, I'm afraid.
Well, let's take a look at this next one. In from the Punch, federal government decries rising inflation moves to stop trend. Now, according to the Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Zainab Ahmed, the President, Major General Buhari, has directed the National Food Security Council to brainstorm and make recommendations on the way forward. Your thoughts?
Okay, thank you, Chopin. Hmm. Okay, let's start this way.
As he marshals his thoughts.
The federal government has decried the rising inflation. So, beyond decrying it and beyond telling us of potential moves to tackle it, we must understand how we got here. Now, let's take food inflation. Agriculture has been impacted by a number of factors. One is the growing insecurity in the land, where in the parts of Nigeria where proper agricultural farming is going on, they've been terrorized by armed men, either gunmen, unknown gunmen, or terrorists, and they've had to pay ransoms to access their farms, and in some cases, their farm produce has been seized. You then have the problem of a poor road infrastructure between the farms and where they can get the produce to the markets. We then have a poor storage culture in Nigeria. You then have the flooding that has just gone on, which has also worsened matters. Then you have the numerous police checkpoints all the way from the areas where agriculture, the food is produced, up until where it is sold or consumed down south. Add to the mix the Russia-Ukraine crisis.
Mhm.
So it's a very volatile cocktail mix.
And very potent.
Yes. Then we then have what I'll describe as a cost pull inflation in Nigeria, where our inflation is determined by the continued rise in the cost of providing goods and services. Now, Nigeria, it's no secret that Nigeria is an import dependent country. We import a lot more than we produce. And given the near absence of proper forex supply, say over the past 18 to 24 months, most of the things we've had to import, we're now chasing scarce US dollars. And that explains the disparity between the official forex rate and the parallel forex rate. So when you have all of these things competing together, and then you have labor unions, you have people agitating for wage increases, it's it's not a very good time to be in. It's not a very good time to be a Nigerian leader. However, they've directed the Nigerian Food Security Council to come up with recommendations. Now the question is, beyond this directive, are we going to get to the end of this matter? Two, one way to tackle inflation is for the country to become more domestically reliant. So you have to start to substitute some of the things you import with locally made options.
Well, we did that with rice, didn't we? News coming out recently that our imports had gone back down by about 98.4%, if I'm not mistaken with that number, but it was the 98% region. And then we then saw news about rice crops being completely devastated by the flood. So there are also can also be shocks on the domestic fronts. No.
Okay, so if rice importation has gone down, say even by 90%, how does that explain the volume and quantity of foreign rice we see in our shops and our markets? Something has to give because there's some disconnect between the official figures and what we actually see every day.
Let's just see. Are the supermarkets the only avenue to buy rice? When
I,
we're
I,
looking at the
include, I
supermarket
included
stores.
markets,
Ah,
your
okay. Sorry,
local
I did not
markets.
hear that.
So there's some big disparity. And two, we need to start earning more. The finance minister did make some reference to.
Ah, okay. It was 98.4%. Thank you.
So the finance minister did make some reference to what she called crude oil production challenges. I'm sorry, honorable minister, it's crude oil theft. Don't call it a challenge. It's not a production challenge. It is theft. Call it by its real name. Until that is sorted out, until we sort out this business of petrol subsidies, we're going to be dealing with issues we ought not to be dealing with. Now, how do you deal with inflation? You have to put money in the pockets of the people. You have to stimulate spending. Well, how do you stimulate spending if you can't even increase the money supply? And rather, what we have is the CBN consistently trying to reduce the money in circulation. So it's a good question for the economists out there because I'm not one, but each day I struggle to understand what the CBN governor's real policy is and what he's trying to do.
Okay, let's take your messages as they come. And I'll start off with WhatsApp, where D from Alausa says there's a huge volume of money outside of the banking system, which is a huge security risk. On the other hand, as Mrs. C said, the reason should be investigated. The two issues can be resolved simultaneously. One should not stop the other. Tonya from Magodo um, well, has sent in a long message. I think the intentions behind the replacement of the currency notes are good. However, this is putting a plaster on a gaping wound, in my opinion, in Tony's opinion. The root cause of how, why, when, and who is taking the money out of the system is more important than this weak action to try and solve the problem. The timing is all wrong. We will be back to the same issues if the root cause isn't addressed and fixed. For this kind of mass scale evacuation of the Naira outside the system to occur requires three key enablers. One of them is the banks. In the history of all corruption cases in Nigeria, has any bank been found to be an enabler and fined like we have seen in other crimes? Oh, Tonya, you know what? That's an interesting message. Yeah. Ned says, I don't believe the data from the CBN about money in circulation. Um, he goes on to say, as Cheta has often said, the Naira is not a real storage of value. I'll wait to see the real reason behind this move. And he goes on to say, I hope they won't print certain faces on it. Danny from Ikeja says the majority of Nigerians' problems are structural. These issues are well known, but the leaders prefer to slap band aids or push the can down the road rather than confront them. And Mecca from Ikeja says, what will happen to all the money held by the criminals in the forests? Perhaps that accounts for a reasonable chunk of the percentage that Emefiele is referring to. Whilst Nero Cello from Ugudu says, this is a good move by the CBN, and I think it will affect those that stashed cash for the 2023 elections. However, I feel that something is driving this move that we do not know yet. And Christy from Ikeja says, new notes, rise in dollars coming on as those with the stockpile begin to buy up the available dollars. Oh, so many messages coming in. We do need to take a quick break. However, when we get back, more stories and more of your thoughts here on Freshly Pressed.
Love life. There are three people whose calls I won't miss for the world. My mom, my
Um,
wife,
Give me one second. Let me have
and
a look.
finally
Let me have a
Billy,
look.
my
Where are my
guy
stories?
who works at
So
ARM.
the next one.
I can't afford to miss his calls. You see,
Uh,
Daily is always on
Market
my matter, informing me
hike
about
petrol.
investment opportunities before
And
everyone
then
else,
after that,
so I
we'll
can
just go
always be
back to
ready.
business as
He
usual.
always has a new strategy to grow my money. The way he carries the matter on his head, you would think it's more than just his day job. But that's why Daily is my person because he's invested in my tomorrow. At ARM, we want to help you achieve your goals because when you
Okay.
succeed, we
This is an
succeed.
interesting one.
Visit www.arm.com.ng. ARM, invested in your tomorrow. This is Smooth 98.1.
All right, back with more of the news on the national front. Taking a look at this one in from the nation, markets is hike petrol price amidst scarcity. Put in quotation marks. Mr. C, over to you.
Okay, Shopper. So here we go again. Another scarcity in quotes. Now, what has triggered this scarcity in quotes? The ex depot price of petrol per liter went up from 148 naira per liter to 178 naira per liter.
Mhm.
Now, the official NMPC depots appear not to have stock available to be loaded. So we understand that it's some of the private depots that have effected this move. Now, there's been no explanation either from them or from the NNPC or even from the Regulatory Commission as to why there should be a 30 naira increase in the price of the ex depot price of petrol. We're not unmindful of the fact that our petrol continues to be imported because the refineries are still being rehabilitated and turned around. And we're not mindful of the fact that landing costs have gone up because whenever the price of crude oil per barrel goes up on the international market, it affects the prices here. Now, so what does this mean short term? Short term, it means that increased subsidy costs. That's one. Two, there'll be a bit more chaos, a bit more impatience as panic buying will increase because everyone wants the product. Now, for whatever reason, I do not understand why the government still continues to artificially regulate the price of petrol when the people have consistently shown that once it is available at whatever price they will buy in the quantity they need.
An artificial price, by the way, that doesn't apply to everyone in equal measure across the land.
I was getting to that. Even in Lagos State, the price is not uniform. So the price you get petrol for in, say, on the island or in the metropolis is different from the price you would get the same amount of petrol on the outskirts of Lagos. Let's not even talk about other states. In the east, consistently for about 3, 4 years, petrol has easily gone. The cheapest price is 250, 300, and that's driving and buy, not black market.
Mm.
So until the government decides to bite the bullet and say enough is enough, let's stop this artificial regulation of the price. Let the price be subject to the forces of demand and supply. Then and only then will all of this stop because then each petrol station will be able to regulate and fix its own price, just the way it operates in the UK, just the way it operates in the US. We cannot continue to maintain an artificial regime and expect a different result. It's not going to happen. Now, what is interesting is there's been no official response from the Regulatory Commission or from the NNPC. Now, NNPC has been accused of not having petroleum stock. Meanwhile, if you go through the news, say last 2, 3 weeks or 4 weeks, the MD of the NNPC is quoted or is reported as saying they have over 1 billion liters reserved somewhere. So if you have 1 billion liters or even 30 days strategic reserve wherever you say it is,
And why do we have this situation?
thank you.
All right, moving on. We'll take a look at this one in from the leadership newspaper. INEC authenticates 93.5 million voters for the 2023 poll. We heard from INEC chairman Professor Mahmoud Yakubu, who declared the total number of eligible voters to participate in the exercise as preliminary registered eligible voters, and also noted that 12.29 million Nigerians successfully completed their registrations as new voters in the just concluded continuous voter registration exercise. Mrs. C, your thoughts?
Okay, thank you very much. So as it stands today, we have 93.5 million Nigerians who are eligible to vote in next year's election. Now, that is a voting pool the candidates will be looking at, and that is a voting pool from which success will be gotten. Now, the INEC chairman did say that 12.29 million Nigerians successfully completed their registrations, but 2.78 million of that figure were removed as ineligible registrants because of double registration, inadequate details, or outright fake details. And he said, pursuant to that, 23 INEC officials are being sanctioned for their roles in that act. He then goes on to give more details. 40% of the new registrants are students. Now, hold that thought. That is 3.8 million Nigerians. They've just gone through an 8-month harrowing strike where they've been forced or compelled to stay at home. Imagine that body, that collection of Nigerians voting along the lines of their collective experience over the past 8 months. Hold that thought. Now, 76.5% of the new voters, that's 7.2 million voters, are aged between 18 and 34. 7.2 million votes. Now, why these figures are important is that since 1999, no one has been declared winner of the presidential election and has gotten 20 million votes. Hasn't happened yet, even with all the contentions about the previous elections. Now, remember NSAS, the people who primarily drove that process and felt the pains are this 18 to 34 year group. So we're looking at a situation where, for the first time in a long time or in a while, the young people, particularly, and Nigerians generally, are now more interested in the political process. They're more interested in the elections. And what we've seen in previous elections, where there's been a decline in the number of people showing up or turning up on election day, we should see a reversal of that come next year because more people will come out. Because, again, the collective experience of Nigerians over the past 7 years will, to no small effect, ensure that people come out to exercise their vote. So that fallacy that your vote, my vote doesn't count, is proving to be an old wife still. Because if your vote truly doesn't count, there'll be no need to campaign. You just walk into the villa.
Well, people, mm, at least in a number of places, believe their votes count for an amount of money. So I would hope that um, as we come into this elections in 2023, that, as you said, people now have a real vested interest in choosing their leaders, whether or not we will see evidence of or instances of vote buying diminish.
In 15 seconds, I'll address that. The Osun State elections, money was widely circulated and offered to voters. But guess what? They voted along the lines of their consciences, and we've all seen the result. So, yes, they will collect the money, but they now know, they're wiser, they're smarter now that 10,000 now on election day cannot sustain you over the next month, talk less of the next 4 years.
All right. Okay, let's look at security or insecurity. Canada and Australia raised fresh alarm over likely terrorist attack in Abuja, coming in from the Daily Trust 72 hours after the US and UK said terrorists were plotting to strike in Nigeria's capital. Australian and Canadian authorities issued travel advisories on Nigeria, warning their citizens to be on alert. But we also have this bit of news coming in from the day from this day newspaper, where we've heard from the federal government through the Minister of Information and Culture, like Alhaji Lai Mohammed, saying that Nigeria will not be stampeded by the US and UK travel advisory. Your thoughts?
Okay, thank you, Shokber. Now, there's truly no smoke without fire. Quietly behind the scenes, for at least a number of weeks, if not months, there have been quiet arrests of a number of ISWAP ranking officials within Abuja and other parts of the country. And the intel collected so far suggests or strongly indicates that there is a planned attack coming up soon. That has informed the advisories from the US, from the UK, from Australia. And to that effect, they're moving non essential employees and their families out of Nigeria. So, the Nigerian credit to the Nigerian government and the Nigerian security agencies, they've not been resting on their oars. They've actually been carrying out very quiet operations. And because of the security nature of what is at stake, it's not everything that can be put out in the public domain.
Sure.
But I am aware that just recently they raided a particular estate in Abuja. And it was a combined team of DSS operatives and American soldiers on Nigerian soil. And they obtained two high value targets and left the estate. So, yes, the Nigerian government must be seen to be maintaining calm in the public space, appealing for calm, try to go on with your business as usual. But behind the scenes, they are actually working. They are actually trying to prevent or foil this attack. And every indication suggests that it will come from the outskirts of Abuja into Abuja. And a case in point is the attack on the Kuji prisons. Depending on what side of the divide you're seated on, you can you can think it was some sort of official compromise or it was actually a coordinated attack. Now, there are a lot of soft targets in Abuja, and such attacks are designed to not only embarrass the government and the country, but to strike complete fear into the hearts and minds of Nigerians. And the timing of this attack cannot be any worse because we have a presidential election and general elections coming up next year.
All right, very quickly, let me just read this message in from OJB, who says the truth behind the fuel crisis is that the landing cost of PMS into tank is approximately 168 naira per liter. This excludes the transportation cost to any retail outlet. This is largely due to the high vessel freight costs and exchange rates. Freight as of today is around $50,000 to $60,000 per day for a minimum of 10 days. Let the government come clean and tell the truth, OJB says. Whilst Bosun from Surulere says, don't you think the change in currency notes now will spike the demand for US dollars? And Leke Olagbende Dada up on YouTube is saying, when the funds are stolen, crude oil, etc., they have to be kept outside of the banking system because there's no explanation for the source and reason of the funds, in brackets, money laundering. And that's all we've got time for here on Freshly Pressed. It's been a real interesting conversation. I think we know what we're going to be talking about at 9 o'clock come Lagos Talk. So let's talk about the new notes that will be coming into circulation in just a month and a bit, a month and a half. No, actually, couple of months. All right, so we'll do that at 9 o'clock during Lagos Talks. Before then, though, coming up is going to be entertainment news and discussion during the Grapevine at 8:15. And of course, you can always continue this conversation with Mr. C. He is up on social media, on Instagram, on Twitter at Monsieur C. At Monsieur C. There are three E's after the C, and you'll be able to find his details when we post up the YouTube replay video up on Twitter at Smooth981FM. That's all we've got time for coming up. Like I said, great music as we count down to 8:15 and the Grapevine.
Invested in your tomorrow. The headlines.
Thank you.
The
Bye.
stories. The news. In-depth analysis.
There's another
of
movie